Hello, hello, hello. So this is Nubia of NubianQueen podcast, NubianQueen Nation podcast. So I'm here with a special guest, as I always say, special guest. But this young lady and I go back a long ways, and our children actually grew up together. And she's here to talk about a special topic today. So, okay, Miss Pam, can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about you and your husband, how long you've been married, how many children, and you even had that special little grandchild?
Yes. Hi, my name is Pamela Michaud. Saying her and I go back really far, part of the homeschool community, raising our together. It's been a joy to know her and to have her as a friend. My husband David and I have been married, or will have been married 30 years this December. We have we have four children together, two boys and two girls. They're all in their 20s, two of them married. And one of the married ones, Aaron and his wife, Lainey, recently blessed us with our first grandchild, a little boy named Mason Rat. He's 6 months old.
Oh,
So, Connor's the only one who still lives at home with my husband and I. And we're just living life to the fullest.
yeah,
And
congratulations on being a grandma.
thank you.
What are you gonna have the baby call you?
I'm Meme and David is Pepe.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I don't know. I think we kind of like check in every so often by text or whatever. How you doing? And I totally appreciate that. And so I don't know. Recently we were just chatting. Or you sent me something like maybe like a prayer request or something like that.
Yeah.
And then that's when you let me know. So the topic today we're talking about
Parkinson's disease.
Parkinson's disease. And gosh, we don't necessarily have to mention our age, but it just seems like we're so young for something like that to come about in your life. Just holding up this article, we were talking about this just before we started recording. Actually, Michael J. Fox, he had it really early because we all been followed him from his show business actor career, and for
Yeah.
him to be diagnosed, it's probably been more than 20 years or so that since he's had it, right?
Yeah.
So
Feels like
um,
it.
so just tell us, like, when you and I talked briefly like last week, you were saying that you had started having some symptoms and you were being misdiagnosed.
Yeah. So how this all started is me dealing with different symptoms, not realizing that the symptoms were all related.
Hmm.
So, for example, one of the things that I was dealing with is for my cardio, I had to stop running years ago. So I would walk with friends instead.
I remember
And
that.
and my pace for walking was approximately a 16-minute mile, and it had dropped down to a 30-minute mile.
Mm.
So my pace had dropped off. I was continuing to work out, so I'm not sure why it was being affected. I also noticed that I was dealing with tremors, specifically in my right hand, and also dealing with stiff joints. Approximately 2 years ago, I continue to be an Awana leader at my church, and I went to write on the dry erase board the children's names, and I found that my right shoulder was hurting, and it was hard for me to lift it above height. And when I would write, my handwriting was getting smaller and
Mm.
messy.
Hmm.
I'm also a teacher. As I would write information down at the end of the day on each child on how they did and such, I noticed the same thing. My handwriting was getting so tiny, almost ineligible. Really, it was at this point. And so just dealing with different things and not realizing again that they were all related. So I got to the point where the tremors in my hand were really affecting my life. But I didn't tell anyone. Didn't let anyone know. If my hand was tremoring, I would sit on it. We were in the car and I had my seatbelt on and my hand started to tremor, I would reach up and just hang on to my seatbelt to make it stop. Because with the tremors, if I'm actively engaged in something and using my right hand to do something, it would cause the tremors to stop. So I was keeping it basically from everyone until this past summer. I went to visit my mom and my sister and her family in Pennsylvania, and we were all sitting outside, and again my hand was tremoring uncontrollably, and I noticed my sister I noticed her eyes went to my hand, and finally I just broke down crying. And I was like, you guys, I've been dealing with these tremors for a few months now. I have no idea where they came from. I don't know what to do. And of course, like, oh my gosh, Pam, first of all, you need to tell David, and then you need to go see your doctor.
So when you're nervous, I mean, why did you not want to say anything to anybody? Like just
Yeah.
fear, or the fear? I mean, I could
Oh,
understand.
yeah. Yeah. It was definitely the fear. I had been doing a little bit of research on my own, and um, it led me to possibly think that I had Parkinson's disease, and I didn't want to believe it. So I think part of the fear process was, well, if I don't do any more research and I don't look it up and I don't see a doctor, then it can't be Parkinson's. So I just wasn't willing to deal with it, if you will, mainly because of the fear. But with my sister and my mom saying, no, you have to let David know. I came home from my visit with them and, sat down with him and told him that I'd been dealing with this and hiding it from him and all my family members. And it was mainly affecting the right side of my body. My right leg would tremor also, which hasn't been doing now that I'm on meds, although my hand does continue to tremor even on meds. But so what I did is when I got home, I told David, I set up an appointment with my primary care physician, and he said that there was something called tremors. Oh gosh, I forgot what the name of it was. Oh, essential tremors. He said there are essential tremors. And I was like, well, are you sure it's not Parkinson's? And he said, no, he didn't believe that it was. And he stated his reasons why. I left his office and I continued to deal with tremors. And I just didn't really feel at peace that it was only essential tremors, like how it was affecting my whole body. I mean, the right hand side of my body. So I did a little bit more research, and a couple of things that I found out through going to the Michael J. Fox Foundation is that Parkinson's can oftentimes start in your right shoulder. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, this started in my right shoulder. And the people that they were interviewing, this man and his wife, she was saying, my husband had started by having pain in his right shoulder. And so I watched a few more videos and looked at my symptoms and what I was dealing with. And something that my sister noticed when I was with her is when her and I would walk the dog, that my right arm would not swing. My left arm would swing with my gait, but my right arm wasn't. Well, that's another sign of Parkinson's. So I started putting all these symptoms together, and all of a sudden it hit me, and I'm like, wait a minute, I need to go back and see my primary care physician and let him know that it's not just tremors in my right hand, it's tremors in my right leg. My gait has slowed down considerably, and talk to him some more. And my prayer going into that time with him was that he would move to get me to the right people as soon as possible, that it wouldn't be, well, let's try PT or let's try this or let's try that. So I went in and I sat down with him and I said, listen, I'm still dealing with tremors. I also have tremors in my right leg. I'm dealing with stiffness. I'm dealing with these other things too. My gait has gone from a 16-minute mile to a 30-minute mile. And he just took out his paper and he was immediately like, well, let's get you over to see a neurologist. And I was like, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. So I made an appointment with that neurologist. I went and saw him, and he watched me walk up and down the hallway. He watched me do different tests. Like one of them is you take your good hand and open and close it as quick as you can. And then you take your bad hand, if you will, and open and close it as quick as you can. And at the time, I was literally like this, trying to get it to open and close as fast as I could. And so he took in all of this information and he said, you have Parkinson's disease.
Wow.
And I remember walking out of the office, and David had come to pick me up in his vehicle. And I was on the phone with my daughter, Phoebe. And as I'm getting into the vehicle with David, I said, okay, Dad's here, you're here. I'm going to tell you, guess what? I have Parkinson's disease. And my daughter Phoebe was like, Mom, why do you sound so excited about this? And I was like, oh my gosh, I am not excited to have Parkinson's disease, but I'm excited to finally find out why my body's
Yes.
the way that
Yes.
it's
Right.
behaving. A couple of the other symptoms and what the meds are met to treat. I thought the meds for Parkinson's were to treat my tremor. The main reasons they give you drugs or assign drugs to you is to stop stiffness. So,
Mm.
like for example, when my hand would tighten up and stiffen up so that I couldn't even read my writing. Another thing that would happen too is my hand would be open and I would go to close it, and this finger would be locked in a straight position. I would literally have to bend it to get out of that position. So that's the main reason you're given meds for Parkinson's, is because it causes a stiffness in
And
your joint.
was it painful? Like when you had to close that finger down on it on itself, was it, or just it was
It
just
it wasn't painful. It was just weird. I would just be like, why won't my finger close? And I would have to close it by myself. Yeah, just the stiffness, or I would be sitting on the couch and go to get up and just feel extremely stiff. Um, so that neurologist said, you have Parkinson's disease. Let's get started on meds right away. And then I want you to see a movement specialist. And he started me on the meds. I went to see the movement specialist, and he concurred you have what's called typical Parkinson's. So there's various degrees of Parkinson's and how bad off you can be. And mine is typical Parkinson's. And he said, we can do something. Oh, let me backtrack for a minute. So the other neurologist had me do an MRI of my brain. And I thought that was to show whether or not I had Parkinson's. Come to find out, MRIs cannot reveal whether or not you have Parkinson's. What it did reveal is that I have a beautiful brain and that I had not incurred a stroke or anything else. So what they were trying to do was rule out anything else besides Parkinson's, and I had nothing.
well,
The
amen to
movement,
that part, right? Beautiful brain.
yeah, that was, yeah. I had, we had the elders and the pastors at GBC anoint me with oil and pray for me that that MRI would turn out wonderful. And it did. It was beautiful. I have a beautiful brain. But the movement specialist, Dr. Beju, said, you can have something done called a DAT scan, and that takes pictures of your brain in slices. So imagine a whole loaf of bread and you cut it in slices, and you're able to see what's going on in each slice of bread. So he ordered that for my brain. And when that was one day, and then the very next day he called me and he said, do you want to come into the office or can I tell you over the phone? And I was like, no, I want to know as soon as possible. And he said, it's the DAT confirmed, you have Parkinson's disease. So what happens with Parkinson's is the dopamine, the feel good drugs that are in your brain, not drugs, but the natural feel good, that the way God designed us, Parkinson's disease attacks that dopamine and it kills it off. So in that DAT scan, they were able to see that both sides of my brain, the dopamine is being killed off, but especially on the left-hand side of my brain. And that's why I'm dealing with the stiffness and the tremors, mainly on the left-hand side of my body, is because all the dopamine is mainly being killed off on the left-hand side of my brain. So after that call, as soon as I hung up, I called my husband to let him know, and I just started bawling. And it was weird because I was like, David, I don't know what I was expecting, but I think to have it medically confirmed, it just hit me really hard. So I just cried, and he's like, it's okay, we'll get through this together. This hasn't taken us by surprise. It certainly hasn't taken God by surprise. So that's where I'm at as a 55-year-old female, to have what would be possibly diagnosed as early onset Parkinson's. I'm considered young in the Parkinson's community. But one of the quotes that came from the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which I really appreciate and have found it to be true, because of course I've seen other people with Parkinson's and noticed them even more so now that I have it too. And the quote is, if you've met one person with Parkinson's, you've met one person with Parkinson's. So you may see someone with Parkinson's where both their hands are shaking violently. Well, if you were to see me, you would only see hand vibrating. And that's where I'm at today. They're guessing approximately 4 to 5 years that my body will be ready for the next step of Parkinson's, which is, if I so choose, and this is something that Michael J. Fox had done, and that is that they go in and they open up your brain and they stick a device in your brain and then a device near your heart where you can dial down your symptoms, if you will. So for example, if I had to be in front of a large crowd, I could dial my symptoms down and be able to
Or dosage?
speak.
Do you mean like
Yeah,
dosage? Dosage?
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, be able to dial that down so that, or up, if you will, so that my symptoms would be subsided so that I could, talk and do whatever I needed to do in front of the crowd. And then once I left that crowd and I'm on my way home or at home, I could dial it down, and then the symptoms would show up more, but I would be at home in the comfort of my own home. So it's been quite a learning process. It's extremely humbling, again, because it's something that I do not have control over. I can tell my hand to stop trembling, but it won't listen to me. It's going to do what it wants to do. But
I think
the
I
most
want to also uh, just interject here that it's very, very important to advocate for yourself, because if you didn't advocate for yourself, then you'd still be waiting on, and I'm sure you have a very good doctor who means well, but if you
Yeah.
hadn't done some research yourself and advocated for yourself, then, who knows where you'd be right now. But thank God you did that. So
Yeah,
you,
that's a good point, very good point. And I think personally, myself as a Christian, I think it was really the Holy Spirit prompting me to go on and look, and what confirmed it to me was Michael J. Fox Foundation does have many videos, but one of them in particular showed a therapist working with a male patient and taking him through this test of opening and closing and doing different things. And so I'm on my front porch taking myself through that same exact test. And as I'm finishing it, my son Connor comes home from work and comes onto the front porch, and I'm just like crying. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, Mom, what's the matter?" And I'm like, "I just got done taking this test and I'm pretty sure I have Parkinson's disease." And he's talking with me and I'm showing him the test results and, showing him how I can't even, go like this. And as I'm finishing up with that, David gets home from work. So now I've got a man on both sides of me, my son and my husband, and I'm bawling and I'm saying, "I'm pretty sure I have Parkinson's," and I'm showing them the test. And my husband, he's so sweet. He's like, "Oh, no, it can't be that," and blah, blah, blah. But again, just not feeling at peace that it was something called essential tremors, and doing the research myself. And like you said, advocating for myself, and then having it medically, confirmed with that DAT scan that yes, you have what's called typical Parkinson's.
so I know from the past you were really, exercise. So how do you fit exercise and those type of things? And have you had to change your diet in any way?
Yeah, good question. Good question. Um, Actually, thinking about exercise, which has been a huge part of my life for forever, and I recently retired from being a personal trainer at a local gym. Actually, when I look back, I think I've had Parkinson's longer than what I've been diagnosed with it as. And the reason I say that is because I remember being at the gym, in particularly Planet Fitness here, working out with several of my girlfriends and going to do certain moves. And when I would do them, I remember my hand would start shaking. And I thought, "What's going on? Why is my hand doing that?" And then I remember taking a shower and trying to shave with my right hand. And as long as my razor was in contact with my leg, it would be fine. But then when I would lift it up to go back down and start at the bottom again, as I was lifting it up, it would start shaking. And I thought, what is going on? So I eliminated caffeine from my diet, and that seemed to help a little bit, but it was still happening. So I firmly believe that I had Parkinson's long before I was ever diagnosed with it. I would say approximately 3 years ago is when all of this really started. Another thing that was weird that would happen is I would be in the locker room, cleaning up and switching out of gym clothes into street clothes. And I'd go to bend over to put on a sock, and all of a sudden I would be stuck in that position, that cramping, that stiffness. And I'd be trying to stand up to stretch out my ab muscles. And it was so painful. So again, looking back, I think it started before I even knew or had a clue as to what was actually going to be happening. And as far as
Probably,
diet,
if you don't
the
mind, you probably looked at some of those symptoms as maybe I overexerted myself for the day or
yeah,
something like
oh
that.
yeah, sure, for sure. In my mind, as I think back, it's like I always made an excuse. Like when I would walk with my friends, and as my pace started slowing down, I'd be like, they'd be like, "What's going on, Pam?" And I'd be like, "I don't know. My right foot, my toes are cramping up and they're curling under." And I'd stop and I'd try and stretch it out, but it wouldn't work. Just like I said, to go from a 16-minute mile pace to a 30-minute mile pace, it's pretty drastic. But I kept making up excuses. I'd be like, well, I do have to have surgery on my right knee. It probably has to do with my right knee. Just making up excuse after excuse, not realizing that all of these things were part of each other and they went together. And now, as you had asked about my diet, if I've changed that at all, I did stop having caffeine for quite some time, but now I have reintroduced that into my life. I have coffee in the morning with caffeine in it. And then most recently, the change that was made is the meds that I had been put on. To begin with, are meds that have been around since the early 60s, but unfortunately, they have very severe side effects, especially as the years go on. And seeing as I'm a young Parkinson's patient, I didn't want to have to deal with those severe effects at such a young age, if you will. So I transitioned over the course of, I think, like 10 days to a new med. And that transition in and of itself was very debilitating. I had to cancel all my appointments for the week. I literally went through cold sweats. I was nauseous all the time. It was just very severe coming down off that strong med to go on to a weaker and different med.
Wow.
So yeah, it was quite a process, but I'm glad it's over. I've been on these new meds for a couple weeks now, and I definitely see a difference. I've noticed that I do still cramp up a little bit. I do shake. I do have tremors a little bit more. But in my mind, I'd much rather deal with that than deal with severe long-term effects from the other drug that they had originally had me on. So
That is so good. And I'm very thankful that you decided to, make it public because somebody else might have the same symptoms and not know. And your learning curve can speed things up for other people. So,
yeah,
yes, thank
yeah,
you so much
goodness.
for sharing.
I have to admit, before I was officially diagnosed with Parkinson's, there were a couple of times when I would see someone. I'm thinking of an instance when I was in Costco with my husband, and I saw this woman pushing her husband in a wheelchair, and both of her hands were shaking like this. And I said, "Excuse me." And she stepped back a little bit, and I said, "I see that your husband's hands are shaking. May I ask why?" And she said, "He has Parkinson's." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And she left, and I went on my way with my husband. But again, as you're trying to figure out what's going on with yourself and you see it happening in other people. I know one of my good friends, her boss at work came to her and said, "Guess what? I've just been diagnosed with essential tremors. And here's what that looks like. Here's what it feels like." And I was like, do I have essential tremors? Is it not Parkinson's? And I kind of went back and forth between the two. But again, when you're dealing with something, it makes you so much more aware of everyone else and what they look like and what they're dealing with. And like I said, just to know that it was, again, a sad moment, but to have it medically confirmed, to put my mind at ease that no, it's not just essential tremors, it's Parkinson's disease. And one of the blessings, though, out of having Parkinson's, and I really appreciated this when it was told to me, and that is that Parkinson's does not affect my lifespan. So, it's not, "Oh no, you've got Parkinson's, so, immediately take 10 years off your life." It's not that at all. And to go back to working out, and I'll close with this, one of the best things you can do for Parkinson's is to work out. And I've been working out now. So
Yeah.
I have not stopped.
Mhm.
Parkinson's can affect your balance a little bit. And so one of the things I deal with is I'll be walking and all of a sudden I'll just kind of like fall or drift to the left or to the right, if you will. I won't even know I'm doing it. You know, I'll just walk into a wall or I'll walk into my husband. I'm like, I'm sorry.
Well, I do that all the time anyway, but I do see what you're saying.
Yeah,
But and going back to that point where you said that you were really excited because you knew some years back I had like a blood clot, and they did all these tests on me, and still to this day they never figured out why, and I had two of them in a row within 2 years of each other. And so there's something about it's still kind of scary and makes you a little bit fearful, but to know is better, to be diagnosed correctly is better than
exactly.
not knowing, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And again, going back to my faith in the Lord, I'm just so thankful that I remember one night in particular, I was basically crying in bed, crying to the Lord. And I was like, God, why me? And then as soon as those words were leaving my mouth, I thought, why not me?
Mhm.
Because the thing, God in his sovereignty knew that I was going to get Parkinson's. He knew that this was the lot or the plan that he had for me. So knowing that really allows me to rest in his sovereignty and to recognize that this is serving a purpose probably far grander than I will ever know this side of heaven. So I thank him for it. I'm in the position, in the place now where I can do that. And I can say, thank you, God, for Parkinson's disease. Thank you for preparing me and my family for it. And, what the future holds, he knows. It's just basically one day at a time.
And you're bringing awareness, and you're bringing a voice to something that we're not thinking about that on a daily basis. So I just thank you again for bringing the awareness to and using your voice, and it's your testimony. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
appreciate.
definitely. Yeah, that's a big part of it. Because like I said, if you've met one person with Parkinson's, like if you're meeting me for the first time, you've never met me before, I'm just one person with Parkinson's. That's it. There's any other person you meet, their symptoms could be different. They could be more severe. It could be their whole body. You know what I mean? Everyone's different.
Mhm.
So don't think that just because you're seeing me and seeing like right now that my hand is not tremoring, that doesn't mean that I don't have Parkinson's. I do. And like I said, it's literally one day at a time. And sometimes it's one moment at a time.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much. You've been a blessing, and I totally appreciate you. You know, I love you. Oh, this is yeah, it's definitely an awareness, and I so appreciate you taking time out in your busy day to come and share your story with us.
Happy to do so. Love you, Carrie. Bless you.